GeogAtoZ supporting the National Festival of Fieldwork from the Geographical Association. Do join in. N is for nature. And we're going to focus today on the nature near you, the nature in your local park. So think about where that is. Think about maybe how long it's been there. Think about who set it aside. Was it some sort of benefactor locally that gave it to the local people? And think about that story over time. Are there historic images that you can find of it, of what it looked like in times past? In many cases, they would have looked different, sometimes better in the past. There's certainly funding pressures that you may be aware of in local parks. And think about who's in charge of it. Certainly near me, there are two parks. One's a National Trust Park, one's a local authority park. And there are definable differences between the two of them. They're managed in a different way. The nature, the ecology, the way that they've been set out and laid out and changed over the last 15 to 20 years in particular are very, very noticeable. So age of the park, maybe think about what the oldest thing is there. It's often a historic house or some other sort of building. Are there a particular set of old trees? Is there a line of lime trees? What is the kind of general biodiversity in the park? Who cares for the park? And like I say, how is it funded and supported? So looking at the map of a park, you can often see that there are different zones and that they are often zoned for different people. And there are therefore decisions that have been made about this. So think about the different sports, think about the different names, think about the different interesting names sometimes given, as you can see on the screen there. Are there patches of woodland that are set aside? Are there areas that are for grazing? Are there areas for dogs and for other users as well? So just looking at that layout of a park can really tell you something perhaps about the age of it. Many of these are Victorian parks. Certainly we're benefiting from 125 year ago or 150-year-old decisions made by our forebears to really set aside green spaces, particularly in urban areas. And you then need to think, if you're on a more modern estate, whether there are fewer areas set aside. There are notable new parks in the UK, in some towns and cities, and I'm thinking of Stratford in East London, where the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park was a definite decision to make sure that it wasn't just covered by housing once the Olympics had gone. But obviously, there are nature and conservation works that are going on near you as well. There are things that are mown, there are things that are cleared, there are things that are added in, and there's certainly different things about different types of species that you need to think about. So starting off as ever with a map, looking at the different zones, thinking about, is there a river running through? Are there boundaries and borders that you need to consider? Is there parking? Is it open 24 hours? Are there certain entrance gates? Is it walled off? All those sorts of things are worth considering when we think about how nature and humans interact. That's really the story of the park that I'm trying to tell today. Some are very historic, some are more rural, some are certainly suburban. So certainly these maps can start to tell us this story of that landscape and the sorts of things that you might find there. And there may be wetlands there as well. Don't always think that it's about the hard surfaces, the playgrounds and things like that, because certainly children will often think about the park in terms of this. This is Stratford, East London, as I've just mentioned, and this is just adjacent to the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. This is a park set aside by a new housing estate, and you may have views on how that looks. You may have views on how that's laid out, and that is plastic grass. That is, as you can see, very little in terms of green trees and shrubs. There's very little there that would cause anybody to get muddy, and I'm sure that it's litter picked on a very regular basis. So is that what you'd like to see if you looked outside your window? Or would you prefer the more kind of Victorian, overgrown, rhododendron filled parks that we had in the past? There are definable differences with how some parks and play areas and set aside areas, certainly in more dense urban areas, are designed and created today. They're built for ease. They're built for possibly high density use. Maybe it's not appropriate. There's certainly critiques to these things and the different uses that they're built for as well. But stay noticing, stay open to the opportunities of what you might see. Certainly in the spring and the summer, you never know who you might encounter if you spend an appreciable amount of time there. So when you're doing a recce visit for a field trip, when you're doing a recce visit to try and think about nature, maybe always have your camera to hand, take shots of anything that you see, because you may not see these things if you've got 30 children tramping by, because they're worth bringing out, having a printout of them and reminding them that when it's quieter times, there are all sorts of other aspects there. So children will often think that a park is like this. This is what a park is used for. The park is for us. The park is for us to go and use the climbing frames and the swings and so on. And that's the zone that they may know about. But don't forget the hinterland, the rest of the park that we need to consider. So there's a whole range of different things that they may choose to do in a park. They may have older brothers or sisters. They may have people in their family who do some of these sorts of things. So do bear in mind the wide range of different things that there are. At weekends, in the evenings, in the summer, it's very, very different through the year. So talk about the seasonal uses of a park. Do you ever go in the winter? Is it somewhere that you would avoid? Is it used more on the weekends because we've got Little League football occurring there? Are there set aside sports? Are there tennis courts? Is there cricket in the summer? They may never have actually seen a cricket match there, but they may need to know about that, or the Crown Green Bowls that happens there as well for older people in the afternoons when they're at school. So always think about the whole 24 hours of the park and not just the maybe 18 hours of the park that it's open, or the 18 hours that it's particularly intensively used, because that's when the nature will either hide away and probably be more absent, and then certainly in the wee small hours, that's when the foxes and the squirrels in particular will get busy rooting around in the litter bins and so on. And then think about summer as well. There's a lot of contention at the moment, certainly in parts of London, about the outdoor concerts that are happening in parks where huge areas are set aside and fenced off for general users. Is that a good thing? We can ask critical questions of that, alongside the heavy and intensive use by different people in education, people who are doing forest schools and things like that. There are certainly debates about whether forest schools do intensively use parts of the woodland areas of urban parks, and whether that can be damaging for some of the wildlife there. Who decides these things, and are they a good thing, or could they be challenged as being disturbing to some of the nature that you might find there? But of course, many people find relaxation in a park, and we need to get away from things from time to time. We need to teach that to children. But clearly, daily users of parks, children may use them for this reason, are people who might have a dog, as well as community groups as well, who might do gardening there and so on. So it's to try and think about all the different zones of a park, to try and nose around, to try and look online, to try and see the signs and the community events that are going on there, to understand the life of the park. That's really to try and get a sense of the nature that's occurring there. So one great resource then, why not go and do a spotting exercise with children? I've grouped the different possible users of the parks, the different things to do, the different nature and beauty aspects of a park that they may want to tick off on the left-hand side, and then grade out of 10. It could be quite a nice activity for them to do that. Again, it's this idea of an environmental index, having a discussion and a debate about maybe how many young people or old people are there, and also whether they spot those people. So it's about noticing again and identifying as they go through the urban park. So hopefully that's a useful spotting grid. Just finally, then, I want to introduce the kind of deeper story, the deeper perspectives about the park that you might want to consider. So there'll be some kind of very visible, noticeable surface things that you'll be able to spot. There may be other things that you may spot if you spend some time there, or if you do a survey, a bit like that previous example. Um, you may, though, need to look a bit harder, or look really hard for the kind of macro view, the kind of longitudinal view, the kind of climate change and sustainability view of the nature in a park. So do think about those. So questions to ask then. So you'll definitely spot the number of visitors. You could count them, of course. Are there too many, though? How many people use different parts of the park? Are some parts used more intensively than others, and others are completely avoided? There may well be areas that are not used at all, or are actually fenced off, are meant to be for urban nature as well. Is there erosion? What causes that? How could they be protected? Do they think about the hard surfaces? Is tarmac a good material? Why is tarmac sometimes used and sometimes not? And are there sustainable drainage systems? Are there puddles or soggy areas? Are there wetland areas? And what actually is the purpose of the park alongside us using it or nature using it? There can be really important areas and urban areas to soak up all that falling rainwater as well. And then, of course, the obvious thing of litter. Where is the rubbish found? Why does it end there? Are there separate bins? Is there a local school? Is it particularly noticeable there's lots of litter after the weekend when there's lots of barbecues there on a summer weekend? Are there recycling bins? Is it important that they're there? Should they not be there? Should we just get people to take it home? Could we design posters to that effect? If you bring some rubbish, you should perhaps take it away. That's a definite viewpoint that people could have. So that's kind of surface level things that you would definitely spot. And it's useful to try and find some facts and figures as well if you can. I certainly remember speaking to a local common near me and just hearing about the amount of days of the week, like half the time, I think sometimes they said, they were spending clearing up after people, clearing up after the mess that human beings, because of local roads, these places being very accessible and being very open, the number of bags of litter that an organised litter pick might collect, but also that the people whose job it is to conserve these areas for us actually spend in just clearing up after the humans there. What does nature do? Well, arguably, it does lots of positive things, and we are the ones who tend to do the negative things in these spaces. We get a lot from the park, so maybe we should value that a little bit more. So, looking a little bit deeper, you may spot these things like water pollution or air pollution, and you could think about how this affects the wildlife there. You can really think about that sound problem. If you stand in certain parts of the park, you will really hear the noise of the local roads, whereas in other parts of the park, it'll be very, very distant. So take a sound meter, go and measure that in terms of decibels, use the app on your phone to kind of show the difference, get them to close their eyes and really summon up the noise levels. And obviously, if you stand there for any appreciable length of time, there may well be other sounds you hear as well from the sky. There may be planes going past as well. And then think about light pollution as well. Is the fact that we have um, lighting through the park to help us feel safe, actually affecting the wildlife? Again, I can think about parks near me where there's constant lights all the way through the middle of the park during the night. Does that affect any of the animals that may well use that park? Are there other dark areas? And then, of course, the obvious thing of dog mess and the signs and the clearing up of that, and whether there's any bins for that, whether bags are provided, whether they should be provided, or whether people should be providing those for themselves. So big debates to be had about resourcing and decisions that maybe the local council makes. And then actually the fact that dogs will kind of roam quite wide and free if they're off their lead. And is that a good thing? Are there fenced off areas where we don't want them to worry the ducks? We don't want them to jump in the water. That can be a problem in terms of wildlife disturbance. Should dogs be allowed to roam free? Should they be on their leash? Who decides these things? And then looking even harder still, some other things that you might need to consider are the fact that there could be some birds there. It could be a really rich space for birds or other mini beasts or insects, but you need to sometimes turn over those logs to see those things. But is there enough to feed them? Actually, our gardens are usually amazing places for some of these things. And of course, we need to remind children that birds and bees and butterflies don't just stick to the parks. They don't really differentiate between the two. There may be much more in local gardens for those things rather than the parks. That's why the parks can sometimes be quite free of wildlife because actually they're elsewhere in more conducive spaces. And then a great example at the bottom of something I saw from Justin Rowlatt from the BBC when we had a heat wave the other summer. Just a very simple activity that you can do about how quickly water will soak in the kind of concrete heat wave grass areas that we might have where that water just will not soak in. If you have wet grass, it will soak very, very quickly from that upturned plastic cup. A normal summer, it will soak reasonably quickly away, but after the heat wave, it will just not go. It will just completely not be absorbed very, very quickly. at all. That water just can't get through that kind of hard baked earth. So worth trying that out. Maybe at different times of the year, maybe do it once a month through the year. Try that out on your local park or your local backfield, just to give children a sense. And of course, try it in different spaces. In the middle of the baked earth field, it may be much different to somewhere that's shaded by a tree. So again, you could do this experiment